My wife not being beautiful is something I can accept. But I really wanted a beautiful daughter who looked like me. Instead, my wife only gave birth to a plain son who looks like her. It's such a disappointment. So John really looked down on me as a dull woman. But who could he be talking to on the phone? I quietly pressed my ear against the bedroom door and continued listening. By the way, the men's spa I went to recently was great. Even as I get older, I want to keep up with my grooming. John goes to a men's spa. I've never heard of that before. Since hearing that conversation, I felt a heavy atmosphere between us. Then I saw a completed divorce paper with John's name on it. I couldn't forgive John. At that moment, it was Mike who saved me. Mike said I shouldn't endure it anymore and should submit the divorce papers. That's right, even Dad seems to want to separate from Mom, so I'll give him what he wants and submit it. That's the spirit. After that, Mike and I started our revenge on John. My name is Jennifer Anderson, a 35-year-old housewife. Since I was a child, I never had confidence in my looks and always tried to stay unnoticed. During my school days, I often envied the pretty girls in my class and felt inferior. However, my parents taught me to cherish a compassionate heart. Because of this, I think my close friends always saw me as kind and caring. When I became a working adult, I forgot my inferiority about my appearance and focused on being considerate to others. Especially at a company's party, I would take the initiative to serve drinks and casually talk to new employees who seemed uneasy. My motto was to prioritize the well-being of those around me over myself. It was John, my current husband, who noticed me subtly. John was a year ahead of me at the company and worked in the sales department. He was a man with a well-groomed appearance, unlike me. Although we were in different departments and didn't interact much daily, he apparently paid attention to me at every party. Jennifer, you really are considerate to everyone around us. I've always noticed. Oh, it's just that I can't sit still, and when I look around, I naturally end up wanting to help. That's not something just anyone can do. It takes a really thoughtful person. I truly respect that. Being complimented by John, who was handsome and popular among the female employees, made me feel on top of the world. After that conversation, John and I naturally grew closer. After a year of dating, we got married. The following year, our son Mike was born, and the three of us lived happily together. However, cracks began to appear in our happy days about 10 years into our marriage. John had rarely gone on business trips before. But around that time, he started traveling frequently. Today, hearing he had a 3-day trip, I asked him, "Hey, you've been going on a lot of business trips lately. That didn't happen before. Why is that?" "Well, it's because Mike was still young before, and my boss was considerate. My company is very understanding about childcare, but Mike must be in the 3rd grade by now. We don't have any younger brothers or sisters, so it's about time I was given something to work with." "I see. Is that so?" I answered, feeling suspicious about John's explanation. Before getting married, I worked at the same company, but I never heard of them being understanding about childcare. More than that, I was upset that John increased his workload without consulting me. Sensing my feelings, John responded with irritation. "What's the matter? Now that you've settled down to raise your kids, why don't you think about getting back into the workforce? All you have going for you is that you just work well." "What do you mean by just work well?" "No, I didn't mean anything deep by it," John said, trying to cover up his words, but they stuck with me. Obviously, John is good-looking, and I'm visibly plain. Knowing that makes me somewhat angry. Maybe John secretly looks down on me. Perhaps that's why such words slipped out unconsciously. It felt like he was saying that unless I went out to work, I had no value as his wife because of my plain looks. I don't hate working, but obediently doing what John says irritates me. Anyway, our finances aren't that tight right now, so I'll look for a job when Mike gets a bit older. Oh, okay, suit yourself. Perhaps because of my stubbornness, John also retorted in a cold manner and turned away. I decided to avoid further arguments and said nothing. From that point on, we started living a life without conversation. John was just someone who brought in a paycheck. I started to resent living off John's earnings alone, so when Mike was in middle school, I began a part-time job. But then John said to me, "Oh, a part-time lady, that suits you perfectly." "What do you mean by part-time lady? You don't have to say it like that." Even when he did talk to me, it was never anything nice. Even though I'm nearly 40, I'm not old enough to be called a lady. I didn't want to deal with John, so I quickly finished the housework and went straight to the bath. Just as I was about to enter the bedroom after my bath, I heard John's voice coming from inside. It seemed he was talking to someone on the phone. I didn't intend to eavesdrop, but I couldn't help hearing the conversation, and I was shocked. My wife not being beautiful is something I can accept, but I really wanted a beautiful daughter who looked like me. Instead, my wife only gave birth to a plain son who looks like her. It's such a disappointment. So John really looked down on me as a plain woman. But who could John be talking to on the phone? I gently pressed my ear against the bedroom door and continued to listen. By the way, the men's spa I went to recently was great. Even as I get older, I want to keep up my appearance. You think I'm handsome? Don't say such embarrassing things. John goes to a men's spa. I've never heard of that before. Why did he keep it a secret from me? A men's spa must cost quite a bit of money. I couldn't help but wonder where that money was coming from. But I pretended not to hear anything. After John finished his call, I waited a bit and then entered the bedroom as if nothing had happened. John pretended to be asleep in bed, trying to hide that he had been on the phone. The atmosphere felt heavy. Feeling this, I silently slipped into bed. Lying there, tears began to flow. I know I'm not as attractive as John, but knowing how he truly feels about me is unbearably painful. I tried to cry silently so John wouldn't notice. And then, the next morning, before leaving for work, John said, "I'm going on a business trip for the next 3 days. I'll be back late the night after tomorrow." Saying this, John quickly left the house. Today is Friday, so he'll return late Sunday night. I couldn't help but wonder if it was really a business trip. But it seemed like perfect timing. While John was away, I planned to investigate something. 3 days later, when John returned, I noticed a slight change in him. His skin looked noticeably smoother. I see. That explains it. During John's absence, my investigation led me to a realization. Unaware that his secret had been discovered, John mentioned another business trip. Next month, I'll be traveling abroad for a week starting on the 20th. "Oh, okay," I replied. I pretended not to notice anything and answered accordingly. This time, he might be getting a treatment that takes a long time. Or maybe he has some other things that requires him to be away for a week. As I thought about this, I remembered the person John was talking to on the phone. Someone who said John looked cool for going to a men's spa. Could that person be? The day for John's overseas business trip arrived. Judging by his belongings, it seemed true that he was going abroad. He had his passport ready. His attire was the usual suit he wore to work, not something you'd wear for leisure. It might really be a business trip, but I could confirm that when he returned. I saw John off at the door, noting his somewhat cheerful demeanor. Now, I had things to do before John returned. I opened John's desktop computer. For someone as meticulous as John, it was surprising that he didn't have a lock on it. Maybe he feels safe because he doesn't take it outside. Anyway, it's convenient for me. A week later, John returned. "Oh, I'm so tired. I already had dinner, so I'm going straight to bed." As soon as he said that, John went into the bedroom and fell asleep, snoring loudly. He left his bag at the entrance, so I opened it to put his things away. His clothes were haphazardly stuffed inside. Even though John kept his appearance neat, he left all the organization to me. "This is going to be a chore," I sighed and muttered as I took out his belongings. Then, from the very bottom, a piece of paper fell out. When I opened it, it was divorce papers. Moreover, John's part has already been filled out. So, John had grown tired of me, finding me far inferior to him. For now, I decided to keep the divorce papers hidden so John wouldn't find it. I was also fed up with our superficial married life. Besides, from checking the computer, I found out that John had been lying to me a lot. What I had been checking on John's computer were the credit card records. Fortunately, we shared a credit card, so while I didn't use it, I had the ID and password for emergencies. I was upset that I wasn't allowed my own credit card, but I never thought sharing one would come in handy at a time like this. Most of the charges were for the men's spa. Moreover, the dates he used the spa always coincided with his supposed business trips. Even during this overseas business trip, there were many suspicious charges. Some payments were in the range of several $100,000, and they included brand names I'd never heard of. With so many secrets being kept from me, I couldn't forgive John. That night, I printed something from John's computer screen. Just then, Mike woke up and asked me, "Mom, what are you doing?" The printer noise woke me up. "Oh, I'm sorry, Mike." I apologized, but as I hurried to hide the printed paper, it was too late. Mike picked up the paper, his face frozen in shock. "What is this? Men's spa? It cost a fortune. Did Dad use this?" I regretted showing something so shocking to my middle school son. "I'm sorry for showing you this, but don't worry, everything will be fine." "It's not fine, Mom. You're working part-time and managing everything. What on earth is Dad thinking?" Mike was more concerned about me than I had realized. The boy I thought of as a child had grown up so much without me noticing. I explained to Mike about John's fake business trips and frequent visits to the spa, and also about the divorce paper I had found. "So, I plan to confront your father with the screenshots of his credit card charges." "That's not enough. I have a better idea. Leave it to me." Mike then suggested how to use the printouts against John. "And Mom, you don't have to endure this anymore. I'll support you. Let's go submit the divorce papers right away." With Mike's encouragement and support, I made up my mind. "You're right. Dad seems to want to separate anyway. Let's give him what he wants." That's the spirit. Mike and I packed our things and left the house while John was still asleep. As soon as the office opened, we submitted the divorce papers and returned to my parents' house. Since Mike was on winter break, he could relax for a while. John, left alone at home, might be the one struggling now. Well, it's not my concern, but John often can't wake up by himself in the morning. I bet he's surprised to find no one at home when he wakes up this morning. Plus, the house is in quite a state right now. As I thought about this, sure enough, I got a furious call from John. "Hey, where are you two? And what the hell is this? You've plastered credit card statements all over the house. And even receipts from the spa. Where did you find all this?" "Yes, I found John's hidden spa receipts while packing my things. So, I copied them and posted them around the house." Of course, this was Mike's idea. "Never mind that. Aren't you supposed to be at work? It's already past starting time." "Damn it. Because you disappeared suddenly. I'm late. What are you going to do about it?" "Today's the last working day of the year." "That's not my concern. I'm no longer your wife." "What?" It seemed John hadn't noticed the missing divorce papers yet. "What nonsense are you talking about? You not being my wife?" Oh, haven't you noticed yet the completed divorce papers that were in your bag? As soon as I said that, John started to panic. I heard the sound of him opening his bag over the phone. You did. Yes, I submitted them just as you wanted. You were tired of having a wife who looks like me, right? You wanted a beautiful daughter who looked like you, but I couldn't give you that. I never said anything like that. You didn't say it to me, but I heard you say it on the phone. John fell silent for a moment. You heard that? Yes, and I also heard about your trips to the spa. You've been going for a long time, haven't you? I even found receipts dating back 10 years. That's because I wanted to stay attractive for you. John stammered, trying to make a desperate excuse. Of course, saying it's for me is a lie. Oh, if it were really for me, wouldn't you have sent me to the spa instead? After all, I'm much less attractive than you. How would it look if the gap between us widened even more? Well, I mean that. John was trying to think of another excuse. You know, it was careless of you not to put a lock on your computer. I didn't just see the credit card history. I also saw your messages with Linda. What? John shouted in shock at my words. Linda was the woman John had been messaging on social media. It turned out the person he was talking to on the phone was Linda. She's in her mid-20s, right? You were trying to impress a young woman, so you started going to the spa. How charming. As I teased him, John was at a loss for words. Seeing that he couldn't respond, I continued talking about what I had seen on social media. I checked Linda's account. It was full of happy memories of the trip you took together during your business trip from the 20th. She wrote about how you told her you'd leave your wife and even showed her the signed divorce papers. So, John had been on a trip with Linda while pretending to be on a business trip. The divorce papers were meant to show Linda. Realizing he had been found out, John couldn't say a word. I'm sorry, I was wrong. Well, you should get to work today, right? Oh, right. John hung up the phone in a hurry, as if he had just remembered. Let's see what happens when he gets to the office. I didn't leave all that evidence of John's spending and cheating just to punish him at home. He'll face consequences soon enough. I need to establish a new foundation for our lives. First, I have to inform Mike's school about our new address. I plan to increase my working hours at my current part-time job. With all these tasks, I decided to ignore any calls from John. Not long after, I started getting multiple calls from John. I could guess why he was calling, but it no longer concerned me, so I didn't answer. Any issues regarding Mike's child support or the compensation for his infidelity would be handled through my lawyer, so I didn't need to be directly involved. However, after a while, John showed up at my parents' house. My parents were out, and Mike was at his club practice. John took advantage of me being alone, glaring at me with a terrifying expression and shouting, "Jennifer, why have you been ignoring my calls?" "Because I have nothing more to say to you." "You might not, but I do. You sent copies of the credit card records and spa receipts to my office, didn't you?" "Oh, about that. I just wanted to confirm if those spa visits coincided with your business trips. Considering how much you spent, I thought they might be expensed." "You idiot, of course, they can't be expensed." "Exactly, because those business trips were lies." John let out a gasp. For the 3 days he pretended to be on a business trip, he was actually staying at Linda's house, visiting the spa. He wanted Linda to compliment his improved appearance, especially after the facials. Their messages reflected this desire. I had meticulously checked all their messages. I had also saved screenshots of these messages and printed them out. They were undeniable evidence of his infidelity. Anyway, I have proof of your affair with Linda. A lawyer will be in touch soon. Make sure to pay the alimony and Mike's child support. I can't pay that kind of money. Because of your meddling, I got fired from my job. I was genuinely surprised. What? Why? You lied to me. But you didn't do anything to harm the company, right? Well, the money I spent on the spa and overseas trips. It was the company's money. I tried to cover it up, but they noticed the amounts on the credit card statements. Apparently, John had been lying, claiming the expenses for transportation and meals during business trips, and getting the company to reimburse him. When I asked the company if these expenses could be claimed, they realized what he had been doing. Going to the spa during every supposed business trip wasn't going to go unnoticed. He was also questioned about the luxury items he bought during the overseas trip, and his affair was exposed. Getting fired from the company is your problem. Don't blame me for it. Shut up. If you hadn't meddled, this wouldn't have happened. I can't fix things at work, but filing the divorce papers was a rash decision on your part. So, I'm going to cancel the divorce and get back together with you. John, despite his infidelity, demanded we reconcile. Why, you have Linda, don't you? When I asked, John's face darkened, and he said, Linda just used me for fun. She made me buy expensive luxury items overseas, and recently she said she can't be with me anymore. Oh, really? So you spent all that money on her and got dumped anyway? I couldn't help but laugh through my nose as I said this. John was just an older man being used by a younger woman. Don't laugh. I was really hurt. Linda always told me I was handsome, but after we broke up, she blocked my calls and emails, and even blocked me on social media. I knew he had been blocked on social media because I was the one who made it happen. The reason is that I was the one who made Erica do it. The night before I left, while John was asleep, I sent Linda a message from his account. This is John's wife. If you don't break up with my husband, I will hire a lawyer and sue you for damages. Linda got scared and immediately blocked John without responding. I deleted the message right away, so John had no idea. John, unaware of all this, had tears in his eyes and begged. I've lost my job and the person I liked. I can't pay alimony or child support now, please. Let's get back together and stay together. Eventually, he begged on his knees. But I had no intention of reconciling. Just then, Mike returned from his practice. I was relieved to see Mike, as I was at a loss on how to handle the situation alone. Mike looked at John with a sharp gaze. What are you doing here? Oh, Mike, it's been a while. You've grown, haven't you? John is trying to get Mike to accept him, and trying to be affectionate with him. But Mike wasn't swayed, and angrily retorted with a fiercer expression. Shut up. You don't belong here. Mom is working hard to support me, and I'm already starting to study for next year's exams while doing club activities. We're all trying our best. We don't need someone like you, who wastes money and plays around all the time. How dare you talk to your father like that? I was the breadwinner for this family. What do you mean, playing around? Everyone needs a break now and then. You'll understand when you're older. You're saying cheating is taking a break. Is that what a man who supports his family does? If so, I never want to be an adult like that. Now get out. Mike shouted, grabbing John by the collar. John, now facing a son taller than himself, was helpless. Please, stop. I was wrong. John whimpered, utterly frightened. Thanks to Mike's bold words, I found my courage and said to John, That's right. You might not have noticed because you weren't involved in raising him, but Mike has grown up to be more than you think. We don't need you anymore. Lost your job, then find another and live on your own. I felt a great sense of relief after finally saying what I needed to say. John began to sob, but I had no sympathy for him. In the end, John gave up and left with a defeated expression and drooped shoulders. I turned to Mike with a smile. Mike, thank you for protecting me. It's okay, Mom. We're family. I'll always be there to help you if you need it. I realized how lucky I was to have such a wonderful son. Though I'm now a single mother, I can live strong if Mike is with me. I couldn't help but think so. John, on the other hand, had trouble finding a new job. Maybe that's why he still persistently calls me or Mike. But this time, I decided to ignore him forever. I asked my lawyer to ensure that John was legally prohibited from contacting us. Since we no longer had any reason to communicate with John, Mike and I changed our phone numbers and email addresses. After discussing with my parents, they also cancelled the landline. That way, John would never contact us again. One day, Mike came home from school and told me a story he had heard from his friends. Recently, my friends have been seeing a haggard-looking man at the park a lot. So I went with them to check it out, and I was shocked. It was Dad. I made sure not to make eye contact and left quietly. Luckily, my friends didn't realize he was my father. It turned out that John, still unemployed, had been hanging around the park. He probably got evicted from his apartment because he couldn't pay the rent. Mike had secretly taken a picture of John with a silent camera app on his phone. The man in the photo no longer resembled the well-groomed John we once knew. His hair was disheveled, and his beard was unkempt. He looked gaunt and aged, as if he hadn't eaten in days. John, who once looked down on my plain appearance, was now living a dismal life and likely regretting his past actions. After some time living at my parents' house, I saved up enough money to rent an apartment, and Mike and I moved out to live on our own. Mike passed the entrance exams for a public high school and worked part-time throughout his high school years, always saying he didn't want to burden our household finances. 10 years have passed since Mike graduated from high school. Mike is now married and lives close to me. He had asked me to live with him, but I preferred living alone without any obligations to anyone, so I declined. Now, I spend my days leisurely in the apartment where Mike and I once lived together. Mike might have inherited my plain looks. However, he found a wonderful wife who understands his good nature. And they have been blessed with 2 children, building a happy family. I am truly happy that Mike has found happiness. So, even though I live alone, I never feel lonely. My son and his wife often visit with their children, showing their care for me. Seeing my grandchildren is my greatest joy now. I raised Mike to be kind-hearted, just as my parents taught me. Now, I hope my grandchildren grow up to be kind as well, and I always wish this from the bottom of my heart.